trying to get swarms out of trees. When a hive swarms, you're going to lose your queen and half your field force, or half your bees basically. And they're going to leave behind a bunch of swarm cells, usually about half a dozen or so, to requeen that hive. So what we want to do is, one thing, we want to prevent swarms, because the last thing I need is one of my neighbors saying, I got bees in my wall and it's your fault. Of course, my first thing it's going to do is ask me, what's the serial number on the bees, and we'll tell you if it's mine or not. And actually I had a deputy sheriff sit there and tell me one time, when we have a problem with bees being stolen, how do you prove they're yours? Did they have serial numbers on them? So that's one of the things. Okay, one of the ways to prevent swarms is to make sure the queen has plenty of room to lay eggs, because this time of year we're at a honey flow. We've got lots of nectar coming in, and what will happen is the bees will start backfilling the brood nest with nectar. And as a result, the queen has less area to lay in, and that'll start the swarm instinct, because at that point they want to divide, and that's the way they naturally propagate. So what we want to do is we want to prevent this, and there's several ways to do that. We can go through and make sure they got plenty of ventilation, use screen bottom board. Make sure the queen has plenty of area to lay in. And sometimes what happens, if it's a single deep box, I can do that by sitting there and putting another deep on it and making it a double deep hive. And what I'll do is I'll sit there and pull a couple of brood frames up into the top box and put a couple of empty frames in the bottom. And that way, those that I sit there and pulled up into the top box, the nurse bees will come up there to take care of those and kind of bait the bees up in there. And by doing that, the queen will also want to come up there and lay eggs. So that's one way of sitting there giving them more room. Another way to do it is to cut a nuke out of the box, and we'll go into that later in advanced type techniques. But that's one way to do it. And one of the things you want to watch for is, when you're doing your hive inspection, start looking for them making queen cells. Usually swarm cells will be at the bottom of the frame. Supersedure cells will usually be up on the frame. And a supersedure cell they will do that when they're not happy with the queen. Either you've got a little bit older queen and she's not laying as well, or there's something that they detect that's wrong with the queen and they don't like her for some reason, so they'll decide, okay, we're going to replace her. And usually you don't get a swarm out of that, but that gives me an indication that I might need to requeen that hive. But one way, like I said, controlling to prevent swarms is making sure that the queen has plenty of room. Also, when I do find queen cells, that is the perfect opportunity to cut a nuke out of it or to divide that hive. Because what you'll do is they will usually make about half a dozen queen cells. Because what they're banking on is one of those successfully emerging and getting mated and taking over the hive. So like I said, when they swarm, the old queen and half your bees will go off and start a new colony, and you'll sit there and that queen will land somewhere close by, and hopefully it's within reach that you can get to it and recover that swarm. But with my luck here lately, they're 60 foot up in an oak tree, and it's kind of like, see you later, because I'm not going after them anymore. And one of the things that we do look at in the doing that is one way to help prevent swarms is by what we call doing a brood break. And what I have done is we'll sit there and put the queen in a cage, and leave her in there for about 5 days and then let her back out. What will happen is that will sit there and put a 5-day break in the brood production. So what will happen is that will reduce the upcoming population in a hive. And this time of year, that queen's laying like crazy. You got tons of brood in there, and sometimes I'll actually pull brood frames out to help control the population in the hive. And if I've got a drawn comb, I'll sit there and pull a frame of capped brood out, drop in an empty frame, and I'll take that frame of capped brood and put it into a weaker hive to help boost the population in that hive. So you can do things like that to help prevent swarms. If you do find swarm cells, first thing you do is make sure you find your queen. Because once they cap those cells, they can swarm at any time after that. They'll cap those queen cells will be capped on the 6th or 7th day, and the queen will emerge on the 16th day. So from the time that queen laid that egg, 6 days later, if they're building a swarm cell, they'll cap that cell, and from the time that it's capped, in that 10-day span, they will swarm at some point in there. So if you sit there, you can go through, if you find your queen, you go cut these cells out and then do something to open up some space in there to make it where the queen has plenty of room to lay. And like I said, you can do brood removal. Like I said, you pull out capped brood, put an empty frame in there, and give the queen some more room. There's a method called checkerboarding. And when I split a hive a lot of times, or when I put a second box on it, what I'll do is I'll sit there and take every other frame and put that into the top box. And I'll fill in those empty spots with empty frames. And the top box will look the same way. And that way there's plenty of room for them to put nectar in there, there's plenty of room for the queen to lay, and it will help suppress that swarm instinct. Another thing you can do is you can take your brood frames out one at a time. Make sure you find your queen first, because you don't want to shake her out. And take a weaker hive and shake those bees into it. Then you can put that frame back in your hive. That will reduce population and help reduce the swarm instinct. Because basically when the hive gets a high population and the worker bees are backfilling the brood nest, that's when they're going to swarm. So those are things to look for. Plenty of room for the queen to lay, and controlling the population. And like I said, a lot of times, basically if you sit there and you find it and you want to do a split, that's the perfect time to do it. Take those frames, it's got the queen cells on them. I like to put 2 or 3 a frame with 2 or 3 queen cells into the split. Make sure the queen stays over in the original hive. Move a bunch of your frames with bees and capped brood, even some open brood, into the new box. And usually what I do is I'll split a hive 50-50. If I've got a 10-frame box, 5 frames are going over into the new hive. 5 are staying there. I center everything up, fill in on the sides with empty frames. Do the same thing on the one I'm splitting with that I put the queen cells in. Take that hive with the queen cells, put it off a little further away, and let them go ahead and make a queen and check on it about once a week. Once you notice there's a queen cell that is open, you'll probably find the other ones have been destroyed. and start sitting there and checking it once a week until you see, what you're looking for is find eggs and larvae. Once you find that, you're good to go. Look for your queen, mark her, and enjoy your new hive. So that's pretty much that. Basically, if you do have a hive that swarms, what I do is I go over and I will sit there, and if they're like on a bush down low or something, I get to them. I'll sit there and I will shake those bees into a hive body, put some frames in there, put the top on it, and I leave it sitting there under where the swarm was, because once that queen is in the box, those other bees will come down and go in that box. Then I can move it the next day, and then put it into a location that I like usually somewhere else in my bee yard. And I think I've only had one or two cases over 20 years where the swarm that I caught and put into a box did not stay. And that was because they had already decided where they're going to go, and they went there anyway, regardless of what I did. And let's see, there's a book by Tom Seeley called Honeybee Democracy, where he goes through and it describes the process the bees use to decide where that swarm's going to go. So, like I said, if they've already decided they found a new place and they're going to go there, sometimes they will do it, even though you sit there and just gave them a fully furnished apartment. They're going to move out anyway. Okay, questions?
Is there a time of day, or when you cut a moving queen cells over, that you want other bees to come?
I usually like to do my hive inspections in the morning before it gets hot. Okay, the question was, what's the best time of day to do a split? And I usually do it in the mornings because I like to get it out there before it gets hot. The workforce is already leaving the hive, going out in the field, so you got a reduced population in the hive to make it a little easier to work with, because the bees that are going to be giving you a problem are the field bees, the ones that are out there flying. They're the older bees. They're old and cranky, so they're the ones that are going to try to sting you and stuff. So let's put them out there flying around somewhere, and that way you don't have as much problem. And then you can sit there and split the hive the way you want. That good enough? Got you? Okay.
Yeah, is it ever a good idea when you've got your hive set up just to keep a nuke box like out nearby somewhere, so if your hives ever swarm, they naturally would find it?
Okay, the question is it good to keep a nuke box or a hive sitting out away from your other hives to act as a bait hive for a swarm? And yes, it works sometimes. I have done it, and I've actually caught a couple of swarms that way, but I would say the percentage of swarms that I caught that way are about 10%. So, but yeah, at that time of year, you can put a swarm lure in a box or a hive like that, and you've got a much better chance of catching one, because it's easier to catch one that way than to sit there and look at it up the top of a tree and say, now how am I going to get those bees? Yes, sir.
What's your normal configuration of your hive? One deep, one sleep?
What's my normal configuration for a hive? Okay. My normal configuration is a double deep, and I will sit there and start off with a single deep, and when it gets about 80% full, I'll stick another box on top of it, another deep box with either foundation or drone comb or a combination. And what I'll do is I'll sit there and pull a couple of frames up into the top box to kind of bait them up there to get them to move up. But that's my normal configuration. And a lot of times when I need to do a split, for swarm control. It makes it real easy because I can do what's called a queenless split. And what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll look for queen cells. I'll cut them all out, and I'll take the top box off, sit it on the bottom board, throw a top on it, and make sure there's day-old larvae and eggs in both sides, and come back in a few days and see which side's making queen cells. And when I do that, I go ahead and stick an empty box of frames on top of it, so it's becoming a double deep again. And that way the side that's got the queen will sit there and start building up there. The other side will make a queen, and then once they start building up population, they will move up.
So when would you add the super and the excluder?
Okay, let me get up a little closer here.
So when would you add a super and then the excluder above the deep and then the super?
Okay,
When would you add the super?
okay, so when do I add honey supers, basically? Okay, I will, when I start noticing that my hive's about 80% full, so I've got brood in the middle, they're filling the comb on each side. I run 10 frame deeps. When I've got 8 frames that are full, then I'll throw a queen excluder on top of it and start putting my honey supers on top. And
We'll talk more about that when we go to the bees.
okay. Next question. Okay. Thank you.
We've got a couple of words from our sponsor.
You always have to have